Hello there, thank you for staying with us and welcome to another edition of Channels Beam. I'm Victor Matthias. Now, with the turn of the year, Nigeria's tech ecosystem has been bracing up for the challenges and opportunities ahead. Now, while the president launched the national 5G policy, there were also talks, around the passing of the National Startup Bill as well as the National Week for Data Privacy also being observed. So today on the program, we will be taking a deep dive into all of these policies, to see how the ecosystem will fare in the year 2022 as well as beyond. And joining us today to look at this, I have to my immediate right, Wande Adalemo. He is an ICT expert and, of course, a regular face on the program here. It's a pleasure to have you today again.
Nice having you.
Of course. Also to my far right is Jude Fanrami. Also a regular face. Always pleased to have you guys, come here, discuss these issues with us. There was just like a potpourri last week. The president launched the policy. There was also conversations around the NSB, the data privacy. But let's begin with, the broadband policy or the 5G, technology policy that was launched by the president. I mean, so much has been said around, what 5G will be bringing to Nigeria. But, up and downs and all of that, let's have like a recap, what is different this time around?
So the previous generation of evolving mobile standards have one thing in common. All of them have focused on just one radio technology. So you have competing marketing companies competing to be the winning radio technology. So let me use the latest one. 4G as an example had about 5 or 6 competing radio technologies: Wibro, WiMAX, LTE, WCDMA, and competing to be the standard that everyone will adopt. Eventually, LTE won that battle, and then that's what everybody's using for 4G. But it has a lot of limitations. Latency is high. It depends on several factors, including infrastructure of the country that they are deploying. As an example, in Nigeria, 4G coverage is only limited to urban areas, and it's very limited in those urban areas. For 5G, however, it is a combination of several radio technologies in one.
So also, no one is struggling.
No one is struggling for it. Then the ability to work on several frequencies is also a very great thing about 5G technology. So from 700 megahertz, which is on the low end of the frequencies, to up to 38 gigahertz. So regardless of what kind of operator you have a potpourri of frequencies that you want to work with. And that means that the bandwidth, when I say bandwidth, we're talking about the pipe that your data passes through, is so large that you have ability to now stream things. You can download a 4K video in seconds if the infrastructure supporting it is there to support it. So it is a complete diversion away from what the evolutions have been before. This is the world coming together to say, we need this, we're not going to compete against each other. Let's focus on the consumer and let's focus on use cases.
So you made mention of the infrastructure. I mean, not too long ago, we had the launch of the e-currency, the e-naira, and all of that. But, it seems like it fizzled out, not long after its launch. That was because the infrastructure was not there. But the fanfare of having the launch or being the first in Africa and all of that, we enjoyed all of that rave reviews. And, just a few weeks into it, in fact, a few days into it, actually, we started hearing this and that. So the infrastructure now, do we have the infrastructure that supports 5G? I mean, hardware, we know that only a few mobile devices are even 5G compliant, first and foremost. So let's even look at the hardware. What does the policy now say about providing
for hardware?
Yeah.
Interestingly, the policy, 28 pages, does not address hardware. And I think I understand why the minister shied away from addressing hardware. Because the use cases for 5G, in Nigeria especially, cannot be tied to the kind of hardware we have. Otherwise, you're talking of people living in Ikoyi, Lekki, Ikeja GRA, Maitama, Transamadi, Yasokoro, all those, the big boys will probably be able to access the 5G services. And any operator that has paid billions of naira to access the license, that would be a waste. So I think the use case is what the minister and the NCC is looking at. And that's a brilliant part of it. So as an example, my company setting up Wi-Fi access everywhere, right? I need to set up a lot of fiber infrastructure to deliver high-speed access to individuals who want to access the Wi-Fi. With 5G technology, I do not need fiber access anymore.
So what are you using now?
So I take a 5G radio, which can do up to 30 gigabits per second or even more, and deliver it to where the Wi-Fi access point is. So it replaces the cost of fiber. It's faster for me to deploy, and my consumers can actually enjoy.
But do we have that in place?
No, not yet, because we just licensed MTN and then some other operator, Mafbad or what?
I can't remember.
So we just licensed them, and so they've been trials since 2019. And the trials are successful. So we'll just begin to see a deployment. Now, there are two kinds of deployment that will happen. I think that what will happen in Nigeria, so there's the standalone deployment, where it is a pure 5G play from the radio access networks to the base stations to the hardware. And then there is the other non-standalone part where, where you have to probably lean on the 4G network. So it's a 4G network, but has 5G capabilities available. I think that's what will happen in Nigeria. We'll see an evolution of the non-standalone, and then until we see that there are more use cases for 5G before we go to the full standalone operations for 5G. So I give or take, maybe in the next 1-2 years, we begin to see 5G networks coming up in Nigeria.
In everywhere, you mean?
Well, again,
not just the urban areas. So again, I mean that's going to bring up another. But let me bring in Judy into the conversation. So with all of this, all of this deployments and all of these happening, startups will spring up. More startups will spring up. They'll begin to have the facilities, the internet, connectivity to be able to carry out their stuff. So again, one of the things that also had some buzz last week, is the startup bill. And the conversation around that now is also something that is very keen and is very dear, to people in the community. So if you want now take care of internet issues and all of that, startups coming and, they also will have their own challenges to face, which I believe is what the startup bill is trying to address. Yeah. So I mean, how soon are we going to see this? Is there any movement, pushing for the passage of this bill?
To speak directly to that question, the president has already approved the Nigerian Startup Bill draft that is to be sent to the National Assembly.
Okay.
Now, the Nigerian Startup Bill is an executive bill. What that means is it has been proposed by the executive branch of government and then sent to the National Assembly to say, this is what we are thinking in this light regarding startups. And that process requires, for example, the Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy, where NITDA is an agency under that ministry, to come up with a version of the bill, pass it through the Office of the Attorney General, which is in charge of all the laws of the country, and then approve it at the Federal Executive Council. After that approval has been done, then sent to the National Assembly, to both leadership of the National Assembly, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, and then lawmakers then debate on that, and then there's a public hearing, and then the third reading comes on where the lawmakers agree.
Isn't this a long process?
It is a long process. It's a long bureaucratic process. But I'll tell you where we are at right now. The process, the part of the process now is that the president has approved the draft of the Nigerian Startup Bill. And any moment from now, there's going to be
What is contained in the bill?
Okay, so first of all, I expect that Nigerians will see a copy of the Nigerian Startup Bill immediately it is sent to the Nigerian National Assembly, both the Senate and the House of Reps. But to go deep into what's in the Startup Bill, there are a number of provisions that help to give like a sense of coordination to how government engages with startups. So for one of the very, very interesting ones that I love is that there's now going to be a council on digital innovation that's going to be headed by the president, and there's going to be a technical committee to that light. And so a number of all these policies that you hear that affect startups, or the strategic approach of government to startups in the country will come from that council. Another provision there is there's going to be a one-stop portal where any company, any technology company that wants to be labeled as a startup under the government's initiative can go to that one-stop portal to get all the benefits that you need for a tech company, whether you're registering, whether you're doing patents, whether you're doing intellectual property regulation, whether you're doing technology transfer from outside the country, there's going to be a one-stop portal where everything will happen. Now, if you're not a technology business, what you usually need to do is to go from one point, you go to CAC to register, you go to this place to register. So there's an ease.
So this portal does
business.
everything for you, like
Exactly. And this is one of the positions are in the portal,
Yeah.
in the bill. Another part of that bill is talent development. Anyone conversant with the tech ecosystem now knows that for the past 1 year, the hottest debate is about talent.
Yeah.
Where do we get the engineers from? Should an engineer be working for 2 startup CEOs or 2 startup companies? That bill also makes proposition for agencies like the Industrial Training Fund to begin to key their programs towards technology talent development. And also considering the universities and the tertiary institutions to be able to tweak the educational system so that once you don't need somebody to graduate after 5 years or 5 years plus X, depending on how to, right? And then begin to go to another program to train them on technology or technical skills that are relevant to the tech ecosystem.
Yeah.
So that bill also addresses that. So there are a number of things, and
sorry to cut you, sorry to budding. Does it talk about funding for people who
absolutely.
startups?
So funding and capital is one other part of the bill that the proposition is being made. So you would see that a very typical example that I think people would know about is the recent raise by Ventures Platform for $40 million to invest in startups.
Yeah.
The Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority was a part of that raise. And for me, that's one of the best news of 2021 that I heard. Because there's a lot of funding that is available to the NSIA in Nigeria that is not going into technology ecosystem funding. But now that is happening, Nigerian Startup Bill also makes a legal framework for how startups in the country or technology founders or innovators can access funding through a laid-down procedure that the NSIA is a part of and other funds are part of. And then you begin to see the strategy, the overall strategy come from the council, which I mentioned earlier. So you see today, there's a Nigerian Youth Investment Fund from the Ministry of Youth and Sports. Right? Some of that funding is going to science and technology.
Sorry again to come in. So we hear about all this funding, all these programs, but it takes a lot of time for you to see maybe 10 people who have access to fund. What is the problem?
Yes.
One day, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe in your line of business, what's it called?
Well, so
where your cohort, where you raise, founders.
Yes.
So what's the?
So interestingly, I wear 2 hats. I'm a founder.
Yeah.
In the wireless space, I'm also a director in an accelerator.
Yeah.
Where we help.
Exactly.
Where
So
we help, where we help startups. So funding is fundamentally a subject of several functions, right? So even if the funding is available,
sorry, let's focus on local funding.
Yeah, I'm talking of local funding.
Okay.
So even if the funding is there, I mean, the Bank of Industry, the CBN, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, there's a lot of funding there, available. Right? The startup bill is what will unlock the doors to ensure that there is ease of access to this funding. The thinking behind this funding before now is not a startup thinking. Now, there's a huge gap between the SME construct, which the Bank of Industry, the CBN, and every other person understands, and the startup construct. Let me make it simple. The SME construct is, I buy tomatoes for 1 naira, I sell for 3 naira, I make profits. The startup construct is, this tomato is 1 naira. How can I share it to 100 people so that the value of this 1 naira becomes 10 naira tomorrow, 40 naira next tomorrow, 50 naira, but still 1 tomato? Okay, so now I've done that to 50 naira. How can I now make 2 tomatoes to get to 500 naira in valuation? So startup is focused on creating value.
Yeah.
SMEs are created to create short-term profitability, put food on the table of the common man. The startup bill is the key to unlocking that door to ensure that all the other agencies now key into this kind of thinking. It's a new kind of thinking, and that's what has been delaying the fund. But once the startup bill, I hope it doesn't take all the time, has been signed into law, and then we have it, then startups can begin to access funding based on rules and rules that are surrounding it.
Yeah.
Victor, let me speak just quickly.
Okay, quickly.
There is a policy regarding startups. It's called Nigerian Digital Innovation and Entrepreneurship Startups Policy that was launched in 2020 by the ministry. Now, as part of one of the pillars of that policy document is unlocking capital. And what he just said is basically the mandate for that pillar. Now, you need a law to back it up, to say, now this is the policy, this is the legislation that backs how this kind of funding is accessed, and that's what Nigerian Startup Bill is set to do.
Well, let's hope the startup bill comes, becomes law, sooner rather than later. But just hold your thoughts for a bit. We'll take a quick break, and of course, when we come back, we'll take a look at, more of these issues affecting the tech ecosystem in Nigeria. That's in a moment. Please stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. We still have with us our panelists right here in the Lagos studio, Wande Adalemo as well as Jude Perami. Just before we went on break, we talked about issues around the 5G national policy launched by the president last week, as well as other issues, affecting the tech ecosystem. But, as we continue now, one of the issues, again, after all of these things, are put in place, you have the 5G, you have startups everywhere. The issue of data privacy has also been on the front burner. I mean, luckily we have a regulation which is not yet into law. But I want to know, what's the efficacy, of the NDPR, as it were, right now in the country?
I'll take a stab at it and then let him go.
Okay, all right.
So you look at the NDPR in Nigeria, and almost immediately what comes to your mind if you're in that space is it's fashioned around the Data Privacy and Protection Regulation of the EU, right? Which is a law. Exactly. In Nigeria, it is a regulation. Exactly. And it immediately gives you an idea of how effective it's going to be when it comes to the implementation. Because in the end, you can take a law and go to court and say, because this law exists, this law has been violated, as it were. Now, if a regulation has been violated, the agency has the discretion to do whatever it is that they want to do to punish.
In this case, NIDA.
In this case, NIDA. Yeah. So, the efficacy, in my opinion, and I've tried to engage with some of the players and stakeholders in the ecosystem where there is a need to carry out a project that requires some regulatory oversight, and then the processes are just inefficient. In fact, if you want to, and I'm being careful by saying this, if you want to carry out a project by the letter today in Nigeria, you will find it difficult. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah. So one of my problems with the regulation, and I like what he has just said, is that we've copied a law, right, and we have pasted it and used it as a regulation simply for the purpose of generating revenue.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a wrong start. So while trying not to antagonize NIDA, because I also I'm in the ecosystem and we will help NIDA. I think we need to revisit that regulation. We need to find a law that actually protects data privacy. If you open up your WhatsApp status now, you see people's private data everywhere. You sign up for some app on the internet, the next thing is getting text messages from only God knows who and calls. Who is taking care of my data? I'm signing up for BVN, I'm signing up for immigration, I'm signing up for passports. Where is all this data housed? Who can I hold responsible if my data is with someone else? So we need to revisit that law, and that's as much I will say about it.
So because there was that I don't want to call it a rumor. I think it's a hearsay. About how Nigeria's data bank, quote unquote, was breached. So when you begin to think about all things like this, first of all, you begin to excuse me, have a little bit of fear for your own privacy, your own data and all of that. So it's a regulation. What is in place to, ensure that it becomes an act, a law, like you have it in Europe, where it's, like you said, it was copied from?
Yeah. So a very popular example of this breach is when you get a text message that somebody is owing a credit company and you've been used. I don't know if you've ever gotten those
several
messages. Right now, that's a data breach, right? What needs to be done is that I know that the NIDA Act, the act that establishes NIDA, is currently being amended, and the agency is working in close contact with the committee on ICT at the House of Representatives to do that. I think a step that can be taken forward is that a new act, right, should be set up that the committee is definitely going to handle, because if any member of the House puts forward an act, for example, and says this is going to be our data protection and privacy law or bill as well before it becomes an act, right? The committee that is going to oversee that bill is still the committee that is currently overseeing the NIDA amendment bill, right? So I think that one thing that can be done here is that NIDA should begin to engage with the committee to say, how can we have an act that addresses this specification?
In other words, we need to have stakeholder engagements. Not only between NIDA and the House, maybe with people like you. Guiding them on. So, are there any moves towards that, or is everybody working on his own? To push things.
Not any that I know of. Because, like I said, last time I tried to do a project in that manner, I figured out that there was a laid-back effect. Like if you don't want to go forward without breaking the rules, there's nowhere to go. And I think that stakeholders within that space, also within the private sector, as well, need to begin to push, like you mentioned, engage with NIDA and say, this is what needs to happen. But the problem here is the incentives, right? There is a very, very low incentive for somebody to today abide by the regulations of NIDA because even punitive measures have not been seen. When was the last time you heard that NIDA carried out punishment for some people who broke this particular violation in the country? And he said it, which I didn't remember actually. It's almost as if it's a revenue drive. Right, because if you want to apply, you have to pay a fee, right? But once you pay that fee, it doesn't matter whatever you do with going forward. Nobody monitors you. So these are the issues.
So I just hope that moving forward, all of these issues will be addressed, and people's privacy would be protected, just as it is in other parts of the world, and of course the 5G also. I can't wait for it to be deployed. And I can't wait for startups to blossom. I understand you want to say something, but we're totally out of time. I wish I could let you do that. But I have to say thank you, man, as always, for joining us on the program to share your thoughts on, on all of this one day, as well as shoot fair on me. Thanks once again.
Thank you.
Well, that's where we are. We'll now take the most viewed videos on our YouTube channel in the past week, and that's where we'll leave you on the program today. Thank you so very much for watching. I'm Victor Matthias.
The parade of a corporal and other suspected ritualists for armed robbery in Ondo State tops this week's chart from the bottom in 5th place.
They were found at the burial ground, digging graves, wanting to take human parts. What they want to use them for is best known to them.
It is followed by the video of an impersonation gone wrong as an AK-49 wielding fake soldier is arrested alongside 60 other alleged criminals.
The suspect came down to Nasarawa State and started perpetrating his nefarious activities in Karo and Lafia before Nemesis caught up with him.
3rd place is the introduction of fiery senior advocate of Nigeria, Mike Ozekome, as lawyer to Nnamdi Kanu.
No one is running away from plea being taken. But the point we made today, which the court appreciated, is that you can't take plea to counts that have not even been given to you.
In 2nd is the full video of an exclusive interview President Muhammadu Buhari had with Channels Television.
There are 3 fundamental issues: security, economy, and fighting corruption. And for Nigerians to be fair to this administration is to try and find out, from the time we won the election in 2015 to now, in the 3 promises we made: improving security, improving the economy, and trying to fight corruption.
Don't fire from there! Don't fire from there!
While the action film like gun battle between the police and some unknown gunmen in Anambra State takes the first spot as the video that tickled the fancy of our online viewers the most.